Be very, very quiet. I am busy hunting gumball trees. Finally, a way to combine my love of lumber with my hatred of gumball trees. My adult disabled daughter needs her own space, so I'm trying to fix up a storage shed as cheaply as possible. With lumber prices so high, buying all the 12-foot support beams to make a ceiling would be very expensive. So I looked into making my own lumber out of the way too many gumball trees in the pasture. I've used gumball trees before to make chicken perches and sometimes extra roof support, but I needed something better than just cutting down a tree. I needed it smooth, at least on one side. But every lumber making idea I saw was too expensive. I couldn't afford a quality bandsaw or special chainsaws and chainsaw guides, and so I experimented with just a regular skill saw with a 7¼ inch blade. And I came up with something that worked, so I'll share my idea. First, some warnings. This won't work with trees that are much bigger than 4 inches across, and I recommend starting with something smaller. It's very unlikely you will get the boards perfect unless maybe you have a good planer. And it's not a fast project. Here's one of the boards I made from an otherwise worthless gumball tree, and here are some crude shelves I made with the boards. Well, it's functional. Mostly, this is something I started doing out of desperation to get enough wood to make a ceiling in my daughter's special place. I'll put hardwood boards underneath. And here it is, finished. I've heard if you make your own lumber, you need to let it dry at least a year. I've been using cut gumball trees for various projects for decades and never let it dry first. It's worked fine. Maybe if I wanted to treat it to use outdoor, I'd need to let it dry that long so I don't seal any moisture in. Now first, I'll do a quicker version of the directions, just with simple photos and directions, and show 2 ways of making boards. Then, if you want to watch more, I'll have some videos of making boards. But, another thing, you don't have to use gumball trees. Pine trees are more likely to be straight, and those are easier to cut. But gumball trees are the main ones I want to kill. You will need a straight 4x4 at least as long as the tree you hope to cut. If the 4x4 is shorter, you will have to reposition the tree after you've cut along the length of the board, and that makes it harder to get it right. Also needed are at least 2 clamps long enough to hold the tree on the 4x4, the skill saw, and a skill saw guide. Hopefully you already have all this. First step is to find a tree that's as straight as possible. If you want an 8-foot board, try to find a tree that is 9 feet that are reasonably straight, and it's not more than about 4 inches across. Next, cut the tree down, and then to the right length. Step 3, debranch it. You can use a handsaw or chainsaw or skill saw, but try to get all the branches off as close to the tree as you can. If you are lucky enough to have goats, you can give them the leafy cut branches. Step 4, line the tree against the 4x4. The 4x4 should be at least as long as the branch you are cutting and as straight as possible. Ones that are starting to curve like a banana are a no-go. You keep turning the tree different ways against the 4x4 until you find the way that has the fewest gaps. You want as much of the tree as possible against the 4x4. Step 5 is to clamp the tree against the 4x4. You put the clamps on each end. If at the end where you need to put the clamps there is a gap between the tree and the 4x4, fill it with some scrap wood so the tree will keep its natural shape. It would probably be good to add a little extra wood to make up for tightening the clamp so much. Tighten those clamps as tightly as you can so the tree stays firm against the wood. I usually do one clamp going one way and the other way, so it's not likely to start pulling the tree up. If the tree and 4x4 are the same length, I can put the clamps on the very end like this. I can do that with one side of the tree if the tree is shorter than the 4x4. Doing this makes it so the clamp isn't in the way so much when cutting the tree, and can help keep the tree from twisting as I tighten the clamps. 6. Time to set the skill saw guide. This is a skill saw guide I adapted by putting holes in it because I kept losing the wing nut that's supposed to hold down the skill saw guide. So I just put a screw through the holes. I set the skill saw guide so I'm barely cutting across the edge of the smallest part of the tree. Now, step 7. Just cut along the edge using the skill saw guide to keep it always the same distance from the 4x4 and on the straight and narrow path. Unless you are using about a 2.5-inch tree or less, the regular skill saw blade will not go completely through the wood. So once you've cut all along the edge of the tree, carefully turn the whole thing over, doing your best not to let the tree shift or move away from the 4x4. Now, cut the tree coming from the other way, with the idea being it will complete the cut from the other side, matching up perfectly. You can't cut where the clamps are, so that's why the tree needs to be a little longer than the board you need. You can cut off the ends with a handsaw to remove that first cut. If it matched up right, then that piece should just come right off. But because of the curve of the tree and imperfect 4x4s, it's often a little off. I can still usually get it apart with a pry bar, but there are all these uneven places. I might go back with a knife or freehand saw it to try to get it better, or maybe a planer would work, but I don't have one. Most of what I build doesn't need perfect lumber anyway. If it's off too much, I take a thin strip of wood and put it against the 4x4 to hold the skill saw guide out a little on the side that's too big. Then when I cut again, it lines up better and takes off the extra sliver of wood. Step 8 depends on whether you want one board as thick as you can get it or thinner ones. First, I'll show you getting one board as thick as the tree will allow. Take off the clamps and freehand cut the ends. It's harder to cut smooth freehand, but it doesn't have to be that great on the part you're just going to cut off. Remember, the tree should be a little longer than the board you want, so you'll have room to cut off the messed up ends. Step 9. Turn the side that was cut smooth against the 4x4 and clamp it at each end. Hopefully it's smooth enough at the ends that you don't need spacers. Finally, step 10. Just repeat what you did for the first side. Adjust the skill saw guide so it barely shaves the smallest part. Run the skill saw along the edge, turn it and cut the other side. Now you have a crude board. Optional is removing the bark. It will dry faster that way, but with both sides cut away, it should eventually get dry without doing that. Now for when you want to have multiple thinner boards. First, do everything the same until you get to step 8. Step 8 is no longer removing the clamps. Instead, adjust the skill saw guide to the right thickness. The easiest way to do this is to take a board already the right thickness and put it against the 4x4. Then, when you put the skill saw guide against it, that will automatically pull it back that much to create a board that thick. Then, just run the skill saw down the tree, turn it over, and repeat. If you have enough tree left to make another board, then add another board against the 4x4 to pull the skill saw guide back that much thickness again, and repeat until there's no more boards in the tree. Or, instead of 2 smaller boards, you could just use 1 bigger board. The sawdust is great to collect and use for gardening. It can be mulch or mixed in with the soil. I'm assuming the tree you cut down isn't treated with any chemicals, so it's good and all natural to use for your plants. I try to be as clear as I can, and maybe you got it all. But if you want more demonstrations, you can keep watching for more video demonstrations. Well, since you've already seen my book ad, I'm good either way. Looking up from the bottom helps me see if the tree is straight. Or at least enough of it is straight. Freshly debranched. Sawing it off at the end so I can free the first cut. Prying loose that first cut. Adding a board to measure for the next cut. Making that next cut. This dog just doesn't want to move, no matter how much sawdust she gets sprayed all over her. I guess she wants to get plenty of sawdust all over her, so then she can go rub it all over my nice furniture. I'm just kidding. I don't really have any nice furniture. A freshly cut board. Not perfect, but not bad. It'll work for most of the things I'd want to do with it. Peeling off the bark is kind of fun. Soft, chemical-free sawdust. Fun to play with. Even if the boards don't turn out right, the sawdust usually does. I'm gonna make this one a single thick board. Turn it against the 4x4. Try to get it flat against it. It turned out pretty well. Next is an audio blooper. Tighten those clamps as tightly as you can so that goats can be pretty good at debarking trees. I hope you enjoyed watching and got some information you can use.